Hello. So we're
Hi,
live, aren't we?
we are indeed.
So this week we are going to be covering the topic of inheritance tax problems, considerations,
Yes.
for life insurance and death in service. I don't know why
Okay.
my mind went blank just.
It happens. It happens. Don't worry.
But yeah, so we're just gonna kind of cover what death in service is,
Yeah.
what life insurance, the pros and cons of it, if it's reliable, if it isn't. I think there's just a lot of questions surrounding that, especially um for people that don't know much about what death in service is.
Yeah.
So I just want to start off with what is death in service?
So it's a really good question. So some people who have like permanent jobs, from my understanding, I'm not an expert in this, but um, some employers would offer additional benefits as part of the employment package, and that would normally be a death in service policy. So they'll get a percentage, sorry, and a number times their annual salary. So 4 times their salary. I've seen as high as up to 20 times their salary, a lump sum payment, if a death event took place whilst they were working.
Okay.
Yeah. So the normally it comes as a package with the pension. It could be on its own. Different employers have different schemes, but most when I was working for different companies, corporate jobs, excuse me, the standard is normally 4 times your salary. And you can nominate loved ones or whoever you want to receive that money, the lump sum, if anything
Mm-hmm.
happened whilst you're on the job.
Okay.
Mm.
So is that reliable?
Uh,
Could somebody rely on death in service? Um,
well, it only pays out if you're still working in a company. So
mm,
unless you've got some kind of severance package or whatever, then I'd say no, because if you leave the company, then that benefit is no longer in existence.
but even if you leave the company and go to another company,
Mm.
they could still provide
Yeah.
death in
So if a
service.
new, it's a new, you'd think if you change jobs, change employers, that you negotiate a package which is the same as or better than what you had before.
Mm-hmm.
So if they'd offer the package, and also some companies would have some kind of a what do you call it now? Some bedding in period, or what's the term? It's not my mind. Um, Probationary period,
Mm-hmm.
and then they'll kick in after that. Some probation periods are 3 months, some are 6 months. So it may not be an immediate benefit. So, but again, that's again not really in my remit to
Yeah.
discuss or give advice from. Just generally speaking, and from previous experience, that's how it would work.
Okay.
Yeah.
And is it usually offered to young people?
Anyone who has a quote unquote corporate job,
Mm-hmm.
so graduate schemes. I remember having something like that when I was in the graduate scheme. So I'm sure most graduate employers
Yeah.
would have something like that. And any kind of permanent job uh, would, if they're a decent competitive employer, I'd
Mm-hmm.
would like to think that they'd have some kind of a death in service policy in place.
Okay. So they will also, if they choose to offer it to the younger people within the company, if it's like
Yeah, if it's
well
part of their
established,
package, they
and
can definitely, I'm sure, be part of the
okay.
package. Yeah.
And is it mandatory for them to provide death in service, or they can choose if they want to?
I don't believe it's mandatory. I know pensions are mandatory, but I
Mm-hmm.
don't believe death in service is mandatory, from my
Okay.
understanding. I
Okay.
could be wrong.
All right.
Yeah.
So you know how life insurance. I'm sure you can plan around that, and your estate you can plan around that.
Mm.
With the death in service,
Yeah.
you can plan around that as well.
When you say plan,
So do people know how much they would get in their death in service usually, or they don't know?
so yeah, I mean, it's normally like 4 times, 5 times. I've
So
seen as high as 20 times their salary. So they
yeah.
should have a rough idea of what they're going to get paid out.
So they know what they're going to get paid that. They can plan for who, let's say, the beneficiaries would be to get that money.
Yeah, there'll be a nomination form that they need to submit with
Mm.
who they want to benefit from that lump sum payout.
And can that be done within a trust?
We recommend it done in the trusts. It doesn't have to be,
What's
but we
another way
recommend
of
it.
doing it?
Normally, the provider would have a direct nomination form that you just notify who you want it paid out directly to the family and loved ones who you
Mm.
choose. So the choice is either direct payment to the loved ones or payment into a trust to benefit your loved ones.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. And by putting that into a trust, they're able to manage that more efficiently. But I will cover that a little bit later, actually.
Okay.
You did also mention the how it's in a package with a pension. If you could expand a bit more on that.
Yeah. Again, this is not really my remit, but most employers, I'm going from when I was in corporate employment, would offer a pension package where they'd match your pension, 3%, 6%, or whatever it might be of what you pay. And then that pension, if it's a modern day pension, would also pay a lump sum. Some pension providers, the lump sum is kind of amalgamated in death in service. I think there's different variations. So really, we're not going to give advice on how that works. Speak to your financial advisor or go back to your employer to get specific information of what package you have. But most people who are, permanently employed in some kind of a corporate, a long-term job, we get paid a salary, would have some type of pension benefit and or death in service benefit as well. And so the type of pension, if it's a modern day pension, would normally pay a lump sum during a death event taking place. If it's an old school pension, it won't pay a lump sum out on death. It'll just go to your spouse or something like that. From what I've experienced so far, that those are kind of different variants. But a pension specialist, a chartered financial advisor, or financial advisor who's competent in the area of pensions should know more.
Yeah.
To give specific advice. That's really not our remit. It's just that we do come across a lot of clients who have that, and so we have to kind of give them guidance as to what could happen if a death event occurred when we're drafting wills for them.
Thank you so much. So how does, obviously I know life insurance is different to death in service, but what's the main difference between the two?
Well, it is a life insurance policy. It's just that it's paid out by the employer pays for the policy, and the sum assured, or the lump sum amount, is based on your annual income. So that's the main difference. So if you're a high income earner, in excess of £100,000 a year, and you're getting, I said, I've seen up to 20 times your salary that this would pay out. So I'm sure something that's negotiated, that can be a potential. Or there's others, maybe slightly lower incomes, but they'll get paid 4 times, 5 times, 6 times their salary. So that's how it's determined, not just, we're giving you a lump sum and that's it. It's based on your actual income.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So just to go a bit more into life insurance as well.
Yeah.
With that, you can put it within a trust.
We do. Everyone's situation is unique, but 9 times out of 10, we look at trusts for death in service policies because we're thinking about generational wealth and what could happen to your children or loved ones if they just receive it as a lump sum. We all know what money does. It's like alcohol; it's an amplifier. So some people are not good at managing their money. Others are not good at managing other people. So we've got to, as people who are looking to create generational wealth for our loved ones, we need to get advice around how can we protect our loved ones going forward.
Yeah.
So it could be instances where, imagine you're on 100K a year and it's 4 or 5 times, let's say, 4 times your salary. And the death event took place. That's £400,000 that would go potentially to your loved ones. Let's say your children only. And if they're young children, I say young, anyone under the age of 30, they may not be able to manage that kind of cash responsibly for whatever reason. Okay, that's number one. Number two, if they're married, it could be a challenge. The money's going in their estate directly, in their name directly. It's not going to any third party. And so from an estate planning point of view, we've got to look at, well, what could potentially go wrong if your wealth, you set up a death in service policy for your children and the children potentially squander it either through an accident or a situation of life that could have been prevented had they known a bit more of what to do. So that's where trusts do to have their place, definitely.
Okay, so that comes into like the threats to the wealth.
Yeah, we call that potential threats to wealth that we can look into.
Okay,
definitely.
Just before we touch a bit on that, infinite banking.
So what that is it's an American concept. With life insurance, from my understanding, their providers, I think we had something similar called endowments. We've got rid of that years ago, so it's no longer possible to have. But effectively, what it does is add some kind of cash value to your life insurance policy. That's no longer the case, as far as I'm aware. I'm sure a financial advisor can confirm that for me. And so in America, you can have policies where you do actually get investment um, sums alongside your general term assurance. And so when it accumulates to a certain level, then you can borrow against that money to pay for something like a
Mm-hmm.
house deposit or whatever it might be, a
Mm-hmm.
car. So all these loan notes that you hear about, and there's a lot of noise on social media and TikTok and Instagram about these, getting a life insurance and putting it into trust, but it's completely American in its concept. Rockefellers did it, and all other wealthy families did do something similar. But ultimately, that can't be done over here. So the life insurance only becomes active when someone dies. When I say active, you can put it into trust, but it won't pay out until the party whose life has been insured passes away. So the insurance can do its job and kick in and pay
Mm-hmm.
a lump sum. But the lump sum will go to a trust rather than to
The
an
person.
individual.
Yeah, the person's.
Yeah,
Okay. Thank you.
that's all right.
So just to touch a bit more on the threats to wealth, one big one, common one that a lot of us are aware about is divorce.
Okay.
Um, we're aware that, when a party dies, they tend to inherit the person who's passed away, their wealth. And they can choose how they want to direct that. Obviously, some people may not do it in a way which the person who's passed away would have liked it to be done. And I think that's where the threat comes in place. Would you like to expand a bit more on that one?
Yeah, divorce is a threat to wealth for children, and I guess for us parents or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
because divorces can be expensive. There's a no fault clause or rule now, so I believe it's an automatic 50% split in the wealth, regardless of who was at fault and who caused the divorce to trigger or take place. So that's 50% wealth lost because of that action. Then the next phase is if children get divorced and you've already given them a lump sum of your wealth, well, that divorce will trigger your wealth. I know it's technically not yours once you're giving it away, but it started off with you, or maybe it started off with your parents.
Mm-hmm.
And God forbid that all that hard work and energy and time to accumulate the wealth is now lost at a drop of a hat because of a mistake or a misunderstanding. So understanding how these vehicles work are absolutely paramount,
Yeah.
really.
Thank you. And just also to touch a bit more on the remarriage side.
Mhm.
Um, so how I'm trying to explain this is the person who's passed away,
Yeah.
their spouse gets married to someone else.
Yes.
And the person who's passed away, if they had kids, how would they be protected?
That's a very common thing. And we call it like, it's not quite a blended family stage, but it's like once they get remarried, it is a blended family stage because you've got children from previous relationship.
Mm-hmm.
And the challenge here is if, let's say, as a couple and one party passed away, death in service policy kicked in and paid £400,000 as we agreed last time. Well, the surviving spouse has £400,000 cash, I'm assuming, from the terms of that trust. Now, it can stay into trust, which is, if we set up a trust, that's the advantage of the trust. It can stay in trust. If there's no trust, it pays out directly in the hands of the parties who have been nominated, whether it's the children, whether it's a spouse, etc. And so what would then happen if, for example, there was a child, if it was originally a blended family relation and the spouse who passed away had a child from a previous marriage, well, what's the guarantee that your child from a previous marriage or relationship will get any
Mm-hmm.
inheritance tax because the spouse that you've now left may only care about their own children, or
Mm-hmm.
maybe even care about their own selves and not your children?
Mm-hmm.
How do you ensure that your children get what you say and not the wealth is not lost
Yeah.
because of a scenario that could have been outside of your control? That's basically where we're coming from. So we normally suggest trusts more so to benefit the children from these kind of scenarios for taking place. and potentially for I say the parents, quote unquote, who set the trust up. So the reason why I'm saying potentially, because nuptial settlement is a settlement created during a marriage relationship or during a nuptial relationship. And so if both parties are enjoying that asset, albeit it's in a trust, then a competent divorce lawyer can get behind that trust, that veil, because of the concept of a nuptial settlement. So that's something to be very careful about. Divorce as one threat to wealth is really more ironclad with planning for skipping a generation or for a future generation, because pretty much they're not going to be enjoying the asset before they receive it. So it makes it pretty much ironclad from a trust point of view.
Okay. Thank you. And also creditors, and when it comes to care homes.
Yeah.
What would you say on that one?
So repeat the full question. So I know it's care homes and creditors, but what was the background behind that?
Just to the threat of how creditors could are a threat to wealth, basically.
So yeah, so if you gotta be careful. We don't set up trusts because we don't want creditors to get the money. That's not the purpose for setting up a trust. The purpose to set up a trust is to benefit your children, your loved ones, your beneficiaries. Now, if for example, they made a mistake, maybe they weren't very good at money, and there's no trust in place, and they've received a lump sum of payment from their parents, that money is in their estate directly. So their wealth is automatically increased. Now you can utilize that wealth and start buying houses or businesses and all that kind of stuff, which is fine. Or you might say, depending on how old you are when you receive this lump sum, I don't really wish to work anymore. I can survive on this money by myself. I'm going to go into a business venture, for example. And if that business venture went wrong and your personal guarantees on that, then that's a lump sum money that's coming out from the inheritance that you received to go pay off a debt or a creditor. So if it's in trust and you've got competent trustees to manage the wealth on behalf of an individual, then it protects for so many things, and it just doesn't allow what it would allow for someone who's on a personal basis would pretty much supersede if you were to set up a trust on behalf of family and loved ones or children.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you. And also ties in as well, bankruptcy.
Yeah. Similar thing. Bankruptcy is a bit more detailed because they're going to look at, they had the power to look at, your transactions historically. They are bankruptcy, if you didn't know, is, you're deemed to be not competent with your financial affairs. So a third party trustee is nominated on your behalf, normally the public or official trustee, to manage your affairs until you're able to get yourself back on your feet. So that's normally in this country 12 months. It never used to be that. It used to be quite a few years. So if someone has money that they're not willing or able to pay their bills and can't prove why it's not the case, then that's when bankruptcy will chop in to allow a third party to do that work. But they will charge you a heavenly and very princely sum of money through the administrators in order to do their digging and their research and to make sure that all of your assets are indeed yours, as you said. So it's almost, in a way, when you think about what they do, it's worse than probate and dying, because they really do dig deep to find out, well, what is this for? Who did you give this property to? Who did you give this asset to? Why is it looking like this? Blah, blah, blah. They scrutinize. Yeah. And so it can be easy to forget this. And then if you've got assets that are truly either not yours, or you've got assets that you want to ring fence and protect, and you want to do it sooner rather than later, then looking at an asset protection trust or looking at a facility to make sure that we can capture these situations, it's important.
Thank you. And on to my very last point, actually, it's the inheritance tax. I think the massive elephant in the room, especially when it comes to generations.
Yeah.
Obviously, I know that's a big threat, because if you're getting taxed 40% and then the next generation gets taxed 40% and the next one gets taxed 40%.
I know this generational inheritance tax is
Yeah,
horrible.
it doesn't it kind of like disappear after?
Well,
If it's
it
not
kind of
protected?
like could do if because they do say there's a saying, if I remember it correctly, in terms of wealth, it comes from shirt sleeves to shirt sleeves in 3 generations. So one generation will become absolutely loaded and multimillionaires.
Mm-hmm.
The second generation will enjoy those spoils and just spend it, but they don't know the hard work it took to create it.
Mm-hmm.
And then by the time you reach the third generation, all the money's gone and they're starting all over from scratch again. So they've got to understand the power of hard work, delayed gratification. So they say from shirt sleeves to shirt sleeves in 3 generations. And there are other similar sayings. So, and that's a part of generational wealth. If the knowledge is not passed on, and this is where I talk about custodians to wealth and raising them in the family, then you can do all this hard work now for your loved ones. The loved ones don't understand why you've done it, how you've done it, because they've not been taught. So maybe they've not done any planning themselves, even though you set the ball in motion. And so it could cause a horrible problem of inheritance tax. Normally, generational inheritance tax will kick in because the first main family hasn't done any planning or hasn't done adequate planning or didn't receive the right advice. So they've paid tax on the estate first and foremost, and then the beneficiaries inherit. The beneficiaries haven't learned that lesson, and so they don't do anything in terms of any planning, and so they leave it to fate, and then they realize, oh, we've got an inheritance tax problem, and they're getting taxed on the exact same assets that was taxed the first time around, as you said before.
Yeah.
So this is this cyclic cursing. So I don't know if it will necessarily decrease, especially if it's a property. But the fact that it's happened more than once and it can be prevented, that's the challenge we're trying to prevent.
Well, thank you so much. I feel like we've covered as much as we can in regards to the life insurance death in service.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Actually, there's a few more things I forgot to mention. Where life insurance and trusts are concerned, death in service and trust. And inheritance tax planning is still important. So when we talk about trusts, a lump sum of money goes into a trust, albeit when a death event takes place for life insurance, death in service policies, and also a pension lump sum. Now, I'm not going to talk about too much about pension lump sums because you need to get proper advice because the tax regime switches depending on over age 75 is different compared to when you're younger. And so you need to make an informed decision as to how you want the family to receive the pension, as either the pension is received in a pension form, but just transferred to the family, which some people I don't want it to have that, and others, other pensions, it would be paid out as a lump sum benefit. So, and then they're taxed at a nominal rate of their income. Okay. So I'm not going to go into too much of that because that's more of an IFA's job to discuss that in more detail. But when it comes to trusts, it is a lifetime trust, sometimes called a pilot trust. And so there's something called a relevant property regime, which is what lifetime trusts are under. And for discretionary trust in particular, they have their own set of taxes, which is you're looking at once you put more than £325,000 in a trust as a lump sum, anything that exceeds that will trigger a 20% tax event. And so if you've got a death in service policy that will pay out more than 325,000, all it takes is a wage of what 85 or 90,000 pounds, and then that's kind of done. The lump sum may be subject to a 20% tax. So people need to be aware of that first and foremost. Life insurance policies, especially taking out large policies, IFAs, life insurance brokers need to be aware, but obviously they may not be licensed to give inheritance tax advice, but inheritance tax is still something to be considered, especially if they put it into a trust. So all I'm saying is get the right advice from the right professionals before you kind of to trigger that action, because it's important to be aware of that. The other side of it with trusts, with the relevant property regime, is anniversary charges or periodic charges every 10 years. And there can be some form of mitigation or delay with the periodic charges if it's done correctly. So again, getting the right advice around that from a professional that can assist you, because maybe the IFA or the life insurance
Yeah.
advisor may not be aware, or they may be aware but not authorized to speak about it because it's outside the insurance remit or their network, or FCA will not allow them to give that kind of advice, or they're not qualified to give the advice. You need to make sure you're aware of what the potential drawbacks. It could be a drawback to you. It may not be a drawback to someone else, but you need to be aware about it so you can make an informed decision. So those, when it comes to life insurance, death in service policies, those are very critical things about trust specifically that needs to be discussed. And with infinite banking concept as well, just because you can't do loans against trust during your lifetime, because life insurance doesn't really have that element of a cash investment. It's different if you set up a bond or something like that. Again, speak to your IFA.
Yeah.
But once the policy does pay out and it is in trust, and as long as it's a type of trust, because it's not a standard clause for trustees to issue loans against the capital. It's not a standard clause for trustees to set up brand new trusts, and there may not be standard clauses in your free life insurance trust. Hence why you got to get advice. Okay. So if you still want something like that for your family, and I'm emphasizing custodians to wealth because that's what wealthy families have, then you need to get the right planning and advice around that, so you can then make an informed decision going forward. And then we can facilitate the help that you need to put that in place if that's required. So really, really important planning points there.
Thank you so much, though. That was really, really insightful. I'm happy that you shared that, actually.
No, it's important.
But yeah, I think we've come to the end
of
our podcast.
Definitely.
So if you have any questions, please answer it in the comment section.
You just reminded me. We launched an ebook.
Oh.
About trusts.
How did we forget to mention?
I know. So we'll put a link below this. So whilst it's still on our special offer, which I think is like $6.99, all about trusts, you should grab your copy and educate yourself, or bless someone who you think might need that information. Be a very good gift, birthday gift, whatever, just a general gift. Definitely take that advantage before we do put it to its regular pricing. And so it was launched, not even a week yet, is it? So was it a week today or tomorrow?
Tomorrow, I think. But we talk about everything, really. We talk about different types of trust, scenarios, how it's used, the function of it. It's great for anyone who's a beginner, or if you're experiencing trust already. Just to refresh your knowledge as well. It's very, very easy to read. It's completely for beginners. So if you're new to trust, this would definitely be the ebook for you.
Highly recommended. Not being biased, but highly recommended.
All right. Well, thank you for watching. So if you have any comments, please don't hesitate to ask. Thank you.
Thank you.